Namaste. Hello. Namaste means I see the divine in you. The Course in Miracles says, I call on thy name which is my own. Clearly the divine is in all of us. You may be thinking that the subject of the YouTube, God told me there is no God, is a funny title. Well, it was meant to be. This follows on from the undoing of illusion, in which it was a YouTube entry I made 2 weeks ago, and I dealt with the idea of the difference between using ideas in thinking and knowing, and that when we use ideas are constructs, they're representations, they're thoughts that we use to create an internal model which hopefully reflects the external model. The process of scientific discovery is one where models are created to explain things that we don't understand, and if the model is accepted as accurate, if the model can be used to predict outcomes, then we say it's a law of science. And that's fine if we're talking about calculating the strength of a bridge, or we're talking about calculating the braking power of a bus, or something like that. It's a very useful way of thinking. But when we're talking about trying to explain infinite ideas, like the nature of God, that way of thinking actually gets in the way. So the title, which says God told me there is no God, is actually half the sentence. The other half of the sentence is God told me there is no God. That punishes us or condemns us. The trouble is that I, like everybody else, was raised with this idea that there is an old man in the sky with sandals and a beard and robes, and he's very difficult to please. And the Course in Miracles says that the barrier between us and our source, our divine source, is something called the ego. And the ego is a thinking process. It's the way that we think. And the ego creates illusions. Well, that's what the Course in Miracles calls them. I say the illusions are actually concepts. And in the YouTube I did on undoing illusion, I gave the example of how we talk about a mile or an hour or an inch or whatever, and I was doing a quiz, and somebody asked me, they put the stopwatch on me and they asked me to say how long a minute was, and I guessed it at 45 seconds, which means that my internal minute has got nothing to do with a real minute. You know, a real minute is a 60th of an hour is a 24th of the day, and a day is one rotation of the earth in relation to the sun. But my internal minute is skewed. It's skew-whiff. It's off the target. In other words, it's a sin, in the pure sense, in the sense of missing the archery target. The Course in Miracles says to sin means to miss the target. My concept of a minute is a sin because it misses the target completely. And so if I then think, well, I know what a minute is, I know what an hour is, etc. What I actually know is the definition. I don't know the reality. And so when I was asked to guess how long a minute was, and I said stop the watch at 45 seconds, it was pretty clear that my idea of a minute was much shorter than a real minute. And so if I was only guessing the meaning of 1 minute, and that's something that we're all quite familiar with, our own timescale that we live in, but mine is inaccurate. How inaccurate would my guess be about the nature of an infinite God? What use would an idea be anyway? I mean, we have to ask the question when we ask, is there a God? We have to ask the question is, what is God? So if we then start to create a definition of God, if we don't start with a definition, we can't discuss it. But if we do start with a definition, we can't discuss it either, because the first thing that we know about God is infinite. And so as soon as you say God is infinite, we believe that we know what infinite is, but we don't have any idea what infinite is. I don't have any idea what a light year is. The universe is estimated at approximately 14 billion light years across. I can't guess a minute accurately. I don't think I could guess a mile accurately. And light travels 186,000 miles in 1 second. So ask me what to guess what a light year is. I'd be nowhere near. I know the number is something like 6 billion miles, but my idea of a minute is 45 seconds, and my idea of a mile might be like half a mile. Who knows? So if we try to define God in order to talk about God, the first thing that you do when you define infinity is you make it finite, and then it's not infinite. And so by defining God, we can't talk about God. We could talk about the idea of God, but we can't talk about the reality. The minute that I try to guess at stays as a minute, and the minute that I imagine is a minute is my imagination of a minute, and that is an illusion. So then when we start to talk about the nature of God, the Course says that our ego gets in the way, and our ego is the modern term that used to be known as Satan the deceiver. Satan, that is Satan the creator of illusion. Satan tricks us through using illusion. Our ego tricks us by making us believe that our thinking process is completely universally valid, and obviously it's not. And then our ego does something that they call, what is known as projection. So our ego tells us that, for example, if we're going to be safe, we've got to get one over on people that would hurt us. That, you know, we must be strongest, we must have the best weapons, we must be in the most powerful position, and then we'll be safe. And that's ego thinking. And yet we're in a situation now where if the weapons get any bigger, any more powerful, the first person to use any weapons is going to destroy the planet completely. Clearly that type of reasoning doesn't work. And then to go on and say and project onto God the nature of the ego and multiply it by a billion. You know, if being ruthless is how we think that we can survive, and then we project that onto God, that makes God the ultimate ruthless. And then the Bible says God is unconditionally loving, and we think, yeah, I wonder what that means. And it's true that over the last 16 YouTube entries I've done, the least popular ones have been the ones with the word God in. And I think it's because this projected image of God gets in the way, and we try to translate unconditional love into an ego definition. And so within the world of the ego, we would love people if they're nice to us. If they're not nice to us, we don't love them. If they're not nice to us, we're not nice to them. And so the ego reasons that in order to be in with God, to be in God's favour, we've got to be very nice to God. So much so that actually in a lot of religions what they teach, and I don't mean just Christianity, but they teach that no matter how good you are, you're never really good enough. I think that's illusion. I think illusion's getting in the way. The one thing I do think is that this universal intelligence that we're part of is not small, and it's not vulnerable, and it doesn't obey the laws of the ego. And unconditional literally means unconditional. I think that the thing that created us loves us more than we love ourselves, because we only have concepts of ourselves, and we don't love those. Part 2 to follow. Thank you for listening. Namaste.